Hey Army, it's me, Taehyung. I know you're probably wondering why I'm sitting here like this. Just me. No performance, no stage, just a simple conversation. But there's something I need to talk about, something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I figured it was time to be honest with you. Completely honest. The kind of honest that might make some of you uncomfortable, might surprise others, but I hope above all, it helps you understand me a little better. Not V from BTS, but Kim Taehyung, the person behind all of that. The studio lights were warm, not the harsh kind that makes you squint, but the kind that wraps around you like late afternoon sun filtering through curtains. Taehyung sat in a chair that looked expensive but felt stiff, his long fingers resting loosely on his knees. His posture relaxed in that way he always managed even when the whole world was watching. He wore a simple black turtleneck and slacks, nothing flashy, because he never needed flash to command attention. The way he breathed, the way his eyes moved slowly across the room before settling on the interviewer, it all carried a quiet intensity that made people lean forward without realizing it. This wasn't a stadium packed with army screaming his name. This wasn't a choreographed performance where every move had been rehearsed 1,000 times. This was intimate, stripped down, dangerous in its honesty. The kind of interview where one wrong word could become a headline, one pause could spark 1,000 theories, one truth could change everything. And Taeyang knew it. You could see it in the way his jaw tightened slightly when the camera operator gave the signal, the way his eyes flickered with something between courage and caution. The interviewer, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a reputation for getting celebrities to open up, smiled warmly at him. She had interviewed dozens of idols before, but there was something different about sitting across from Kim Taehyung. He had this presence, this gravity that made even simple questions feel weighted. She shuffled her notes, took a breath, and started with the safe stuff. Questions about his solo work, about his artistic process, about what inspires him. Taehyung answered thoughtfully, his voice that deep baritone that sounds like velvet wrapped around gravel, each word chosen carefully but delivered naturally. He talked about music the way other people talk about breathing, like it was fundamental to his existence. He mentioned his love for jazz, for old films, for paintings that make you feel something you can't name. His hands moved when he spoke, graceful and expressive, painting pictures in the air. The crew watched him with that mix of professionalism and fascination because even when he was just talking, Taehyung was magnetic. There was no performance happening, and yet you couldn't look away. 20 minutes passed like that, comfortable, flowing, the kind of conversation that makes good television because it feels real. But then the interviewer glanced down at her notes, and something shifted in her expression. She looked back up at Taehyung, and there was a question in her eyes before she even asked it. Taehyung noticed. Of course he noticed. He was always paying attention, always reading the room, always 3 steps ahead. His smile softened, became almost knowing, like he could sense what was coming and was already bracing himself for it. She leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle but direct. So, Taehyung, I have to ask, and I know Army is dying to know too, what are your thoughts on marriage? The question landed in the space between them like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripple spread instantly. Taehyung's expression didn't change dramatically. He didn't gasp or laugh nervously or deflect with a joke like some celebrities might. Instead, he went very still, his eyes locked on hers, and for a moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The cameraman zoomed in slightly, catching the micro expressions that flickered across Taehyung's face. A tightening around his eyes, a slight pressing of his lips, the way his fingers curled just a bit more against his knee. These were the tales of someone who was deciding in real time how honest to be, how much of himself to reveal, how far to step outside the carefully maintained boundaries of idol life. Because marriage wasn't just a question. For someone like him, it was loaded with implications about privacy, about fans' feelings, about the image that had been built over more than a decade. Taehyung took a slow breath, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, more intimate, like he was sharing a secret with a friend rather than answering for millions. Marriage, he repeated, letting the words sit in the air for a moment. It's something I think about. His honesty was immediate and disarming. Not a deflection, not a joke, just a simple truth that most idols would never dare to admit so directly. The interviewer's eyes widened slightly, encouraging him to continue, and Taeyong, after another pause, did. I think about it more than people might expect, he said, his gaze dropping to his hands. Because I'm at the age now where it feels less like some distant concept and more like something real, something that could actually happen. And when I think about it, I feel a lot of things: excitement, fear, uncertainty. He looked back up, and there was something raw in his eyes, something that suggested he was venturing into territory he usually kept private. The room was absolutely silent, except for the low hum of equipment, everyone waiting for what would come next. The thing is, Taeyong continued, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of vulnerability. Marriage represents something I've never really had: stability, privacy. A life that belongs to just me and one other person, not to the world. And I want that, I really do. But wanting it and being ready for it are two different things. He paused, his tongue darting out to wet his lips, a nervous habit that made him seem more human, more accessible. And I don't know if I am ready. Not because I don't believe in it, but because I don't know if I can give someone what they deserve when my life is still so much about being V from BTS. The honesty hit like a wave. This wasn't a practiced answer. This was Taeyong peeling back the layers of his public persona and showing the man underneath, the one who struggled with the same questions about identity and commitment that millions of people face, except his struggle played out under the scrutiny of the entire world. The interviewer nodded slowly, her expression compassionate, and she asked softly, "Do you think fame makes it harder to find real love?" Taehyung's laugh was short and humorless. "It doesn't make it harder to find love," he said. "It makes it harder to trust it." Those words landed with particular weight because they spoke to something deeper than logistics or scheduling conflicts. They spoke to the fundamental problem of being someone the world thinks they know. How do you trust that someone loves you for who you are when they might love the idea of you, the image, the fantasy? How do you separate genuine connection from infatuation with celebrity? Taehyung's eyes grew distant, like he was remembering something specific, something painful. "I've met people who seemed perfect," he said quietly. People who made me feel things I hadn't felt before. But there's always this voice in the back of my mind asking, would they feel this way if I was just Kim Taehyung from Daegu, working a regular job, living a regular life? The vulnerability in that confession was staggering. Here was one of the most famous men in the world admitting that he questioned whether anyone could love him for who he really was beneath the fame. It was the kind of admission that made fans' hearts ache, that made them want to reach through their screens and tell him he was worthy of love regardless of anything else. But Taehyung wasn't fishing for reassurance. He was simply telling the truth as he experienced it with all its complications and contradictions. And marriage, he continued, leaning back in his chair. It's not just about love. It's about building a life with someone. It's about trust and partnership and choosing each other every day. And I think about whether I'm capable of that when so much of my energy, my time, my focus has to go to my career, to ARMY, to the members. Um, is it fair to ask someone to come second to all of that? Is it fair to ask them to live in the shadows, to hide, to sacrifice their own normalcy because of who I am? The questions hung in the air, rhetorical but painful, exposing the impossible calculus that celebrities face when it comes to relationships. The interviewer let the silence stretch, understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone sit with their own words. Taehyung stared at his hands again, his brow furrowed slightly, and you could see him wrestling with something internal, some thought he was debating whether to share. Finally, he looked up, and his eyes were darker, more intense. There's something else, he said, his voice dropping even lower. Something I haven't really talked about before. The shift in energy was immediate and electric. The crew exchanged glances. The interviewer leaned forward because when Taehyung said he hadn't talked about something, it meant it was buried deep, kept private for a reason. I've been in love before, Taehyung said, and the simplicity of that statement, the directness of it, sent shockwaves through the room. Not speculation, not rumor, but confirmation from his own mouth. Real love, the kind that changes you. And the way his voice softened when he said it, the way his eyes grew distant and sad and fond all at once, it was clear that whatever he was remembering still lived in him, still mattered. The interviewer's voice was barely above a whisper when she asked, "What happened?" Taehyung smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Life happened," he said. "Fame happened. The impossibility of it all happened." He paused, gathering his thoughts, and when he spoke again, his words came slowly, carefully, like he was walking through a minefield of memories. Being with someone when you're in BTS isn't like normal dating. There's no privacy. There's no casual coffee dates or walking through the park holding hands. Everything has to be hidden, planned, calculated. And the person you're with, they have to be okay with being a secret, with being erased from your public life, with watching you be adored by millions while they can't even post a photo with you. That's a lot to ask of anyone. His eyes met the interviewer's directly, and there was pain there, old but still sharp. "I tried," he said. "We both tried, but eventually the weight of it became too much. Not because the feelings weren't real, but because the circumstances were impossible. And when it ended, I realized something that scared me. I realized that as long as I'm in this life, as long as I'm V from BTS, Maybe I don't get to have what other people have. Maybe that's the trade off. The room felt heavier with each word, the confession settling over everyone like a blanket of melancholy. But here's the thing, Taehyung continued, his voice gaining strength. I don't resent it. I chose this life. I love this life. I love ARMY. I love the music. I love the members. I wouldn't trade any of it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't cost me something. And marriage, family, a private life, those might be part of the cost. His acceptance of that reality was both mature and heartbreaking. The acknowledgement that every choice comes with sacrifice, and his choice of this extraordinary life meant sacrificing certain ordinary dreams. The interviewer's next question was gentle but probing. Do you think you'll ever try again? Try to make it work with someone? Taehyung was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where afternoon light was starting to fade into evening gold. I want to, he said finally. I want to believe that somewhere out there is someone who can handle this life, who can love me despite all the complications, who can be patient with the hiding and the distance and the fact that I'll never fully belong to just them. But wanting something and believing it's possible are different things, and right now I'm somewhere in between. The honesty was relentless, each confession peeling back another layer until Taehyung stood emotionally naked in front of the camera, in front of the world. And maybe that's why I'm not ready for marriage, he said. Not because I don't want it, but because I'm still figuring out if it's even possible for someone like me. And I think that's the honest answer nobody wants to hear. That sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes circumstances matter more than feelings. Sometimes reality gets in the way of even the most beautiful dreams. The weight of what Taehyung had just revealed settled into every corner of the studio, a confession so raw it felt almost intrusive to witness. But he wasn't done. There was something in the way he shifted in his seat, the way his fingers drummed once against his thigh before going still again, that suggested he was on the edge of saying something even more personal. The interviewer sensed it too, and she waited, patient and encouraging, understanding that some truths need space to breathe before they can be spoken. Taehyung's eyes focused on something distant, maybe a memory, maybe just the complicated tangle of thoughts in his head. You know what the hardest part is? He asked, though it wasn't really a question that expected an answer. It's that I've seen what marriage looks like for other people. My parents, my friends outside the industry, even some couples who manage to make it work despite fame. And there's this peace in it, this partnership that I crave. Someone to come home to who knows all of you, not just the parts you show the world. Someone who sees you at your worst and chooses to stay anyway. His voice carried a longing that was palpable, the kind of yearning that comes from watching others have something you're not sure you'll ever get to experience. I think about coming home after a long tour, he continued, and instead of an empty apartment, there's someone there. Someone who asks how I'm really doing, not how the shows went. Someone who reminds me that I'm more than my career, more than the image, more than the statistics and the achievements. That sounds like home to me. And I want that so badly, sometimes it physically hurts. The confession hung in the air, vulnerable and achingly human. The interviewer's voice was soft when she responded. It sounds like you have a clear picture of what you want. So what's stopping you from pursuing it? Taehyung's laugh was quiet and self-deprecating. Fear, mostly. Fear that I'll hurt someone by bringing them into this chaos. Fear that I'll fail at it because I don't know how to split myself between my career and a relationship. Fear that I'll choose wrong and regret it. Fear that I'll choose right and still lose it because this life doesn't allow for normal things. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together, the posture of someone unburdening himself. I've watched relationships crumble under the pressure of this industry. I've seen friends lose people they loved because the scrutiny became too much, because the hiding became exhausting, because eventually you have to choose between privacy and authenticity, and neither option is fair. And I think about whether I have the strength to protect someone from all of that while also protecting my career, my members, my fans. It feels impossible some days. The complexity of his situation was laid bare. The impossible tightrope walk between personal happiness and professional obligation, between private desire and public persona. And here's something I've never said out loud, Taehyung added, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. There was someone, not just someone I loved, but someone I could have built a life with. Someone who understood me in ways I didn't even understand myself. And I let her go because I was convinced it was the right thing to do, the responsible thing, the thing that would protect both of us from the inevitable pain. The admission sent ripples through the room. This wasn't speculation or rumor. This was Taehyung confirming something deeply personal, something that clearly still affected him. The interviewer's eyes widened slightly. Do you regret it? She asked gently. Taehyung's expression was complicated, a mix of sadness and resignation, and something like acceptance. Every single day, he said simply, but I also know why I did it. And I can say for certain that I was wrong. Maybe we would have destroyed each other eventually. Maybe the pressure would have killed what we had. Or maybe we would have found a way I'll never know. And that not knowing is its own kind of torture. He paused, swallowing hard, his composure cracking just slightly. She deserves someone who could give her everything, he continued. Someone who could take her out without disguises, someone who could post couple photos, someone whose schedule didn't require a team of managers to coordinate, someone normal, and I couldn't be that for her no matter how much I wanted to. So I made the choice to let her go, and I've been living with that choice ever since. Sometimes I think it was the most mature thing I've ever done. Other times I think it was the biggest mistake of my life. The rawness of that confession, the obvious pain still present in his voice, made it clear that this wasn't ancient history for Taehyung. This was a wound that hadn't fully healed, a what if that haunted him. The interviewer gave him a moment, then asked carefully, do you think about what might have been? Taehyung's smile was sad and distant. All the time, he admitted. I imagine an alternate universe where I'm not famous, where I'm just a regular guy who fell in love with a regular girl and got to build a regular life. And in that universe, maybe we're married now. Maybe we have a home and inside jokes and a future we're planning together. And that version of me is probably happier in some ways, even if he doesn't have all of this. The acknowledgement that fame, despite all its perks and privileges, might have cost him something more valuable than any of it, was profound. He spoke to the universal truth that success doesn't guarantee happiness, that having everything in professional terms can still leave you empty in personal ones. And that's the trade off nobody talks about, Taehyung said, his voice gaining strength as he found his footing in this difficult truth. Everyone sees the glamour, the awards, the sold out stadiums, the adoration, but they don't see what you give up to have those things. They don't see the relationships that can survive, the pressure, the normal experiences you'll never have, the pieces of yourself you lose along the way. He looked directly into the camera then, as if speaking not to the interviewer but to everyone who would eventually watch this, to every fan who idolized him, to every person who envied his life. I'm grateful for everything I have, he said clearly. I wouldn't change my path. But I also want people to understand that it's not all perfect. That behind the music and the performances and the public image, I'm just a person trying to figure out how to be happy, how to be loved, how to love someone back without destroying either of us in the process. And some days I have no idea if I'm succeeding at any of it. The vulnerability was staggering. The willingness to expose his uncertainties and failures despite his status as someone millions looked up to. And maybe that's why I'm not ready for marriage right now, he continued, because I haven't figured out how to balance it all. Because I'm still carrying the weight of the relationship I walked away from. Because I'm still scared that I'll hurt someone again. Or worse, that I'll hurt myself again by hoping for something that this life won't allow me to have. Marriage should be entered with confidence and commitment. And right now, I have neither. What I have is longing and fear and uncertainty, and that's not enough to build a foundation on. The interviewer nodded slowly, absorbing the depth of what he was sharing. But you also said you think about it more now than before. Does that mean something has changed? Taehyung considered the question, his brow furrowing thoughtfully. I think what's changed is that I'm tired of pretending I don't want it, he said. For years, I convinced myself that my career was enough, that Army's love was enough, that my art was enough. And all of those things are important and meaningful, and I'm grateful for them. But they don't replace human connection. They don't replace intimacy. They don't replace having someone who's yours in a way that's different from any other relationship. His honesty was refreshing in an industry where idols often maintain perfect facades, where admitting to wanting romantic love could be seen as betraying fans who wanted to believe they were enough. But Taehyung was pushing past those boundaries, speaking truth that resonated beyond his specific circumstances. I'm at a point in my life, he continued, where I'm starting to understand that it's okay to want multiple things. It's okay to love my career and also want a partner. It's okay to cherish ARMY and also crave intimacy with one person. These things don't have to be in conflict, even though sometimes it feels like they are. And maybe part of getting ready for marriage is accepting that I'm allowed to want it, that wanting it doesn't make me less dedicated to music or less grateful for everything I have. The evolution in his thinking was evident, a maturity that came from years of wrestling with these questions, from lived experience of choosing career over relationship and living with those consequences. The interviewer leaned forward, her voice gentle. So, if the right person came along tomorrow, someone who understood your life and was willing to navigate it with you, would you be ready then? Taehyung's expression flickered with something between hope and fear. I want to say yes, he answered slowly. I want to believe that if the universe gave me that chance again, I'd have the courage to take it this time. But honestly, I don't know. Because wanting to be ready and actually being ready are different things. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration mixed with contemplation. I think I'd need to know that I could protect them, he elaborated. Protect them from the harassment, from the invasion of privacy, from the hate that inevitably comes when fans feel threatened by someone taking their idol's attention. I need to know that I was strong enough to stand between them and all of that ugliness while still giving them the love and attention they deserve. And I need to trust that they were strong enough to handle it too. Because no matter how much I try to protect someone, some of it will always get through. The practical concerns he outlined were sobering, a reminder that romance for someone at his level of fame wasn't just about compatibility or chemistry, but about resilience and strategy and constant vigilance. It's exhausting just thinking about it, Taehyung admitted with a tired smile. And that exhaustion is part of why I'm not ready. Because marriage shouldn't feel like another job, another thing to manage and navigate and strategize around. It should feel like relief, like home, like the one place where you don't have to perform or protect or calculate every move. And I don't know if I can give someone that when my life is still so much about all those other things. The confession revealed the core of his hesitation, the understanding that he couldn't offer what marriage deserved to be, at least not yet, not in his current circumstances. But he wasn't giving up hope entirely. The fact that he was talking about it, thinking about it, wrestling with it openly suggested that despite all the obstacles, the desire for that connection remained strong. Maybe someday, he said quietly, I'll figure out how to make space for it. Maybe someday I'll meet someone who's brave enough and patient enough and strong enough to build something with me despite all the complications. Maybe someday I'll trust myself enough to let someone in completely, but that someday isn't today. And I think that's the most honest answer I can give. The room sat with that truth, the acceptance that timing matters, that wanting something isn't always enough, that sometimes the most mature choice is acknowledging you're not ready rather than forcing something before its time. Taehyung looked exhausted but also somehow lighter, as if speaking these truths had released some of the pressure he'd been carrying. The interviewer smiled at him warmly, respect evident in her expression. Thank you for being so honest, she said. I know that wasn't easy to share. Taehyung nodded, returning the smile with one that was more genuine, less burdened. It wasn't easy, he agreed, but maybe it's important. Maybe there's someone out there who needed to hear that it's okay to not have everything figured out, that it's okay to want things you're not ready for yet, that it's okay to make mistakes and live with regret and still choose to keep going forward. If my honesty helps even one person feel less alone in their own struggles, then it was worth the discomfort of revealing it. And with that, something shifted in the energy of the interview, moving from confession toward reflection, from pain toward understanding. The studio has grown darker now. The afternoon light, long gone, replaced by the warm glow of evening lamps that make everything feel even more intimate, more personal. I've been sitting here for what feels like hours, peeling back layers I usually keep hidden, and I can feel the exhaustion settling into my bones. But it's a good exhaustion, the kind that comes from finally saying things you've been holding inside for too long. The interviewer looks at me with this expression of gratitude mixed with concern, like she knows we've gone deep into waters most idols never touch, and she's honored but also worried about how I'll feel once this airs, once Army hears everything I've said. But I'm not worried, I'm relieved. Because pretending is more exhausting than honesty, and I'm tired of pretending I have all the answers. So here's where I am, Army. Here's my honest answer about marriage. I'm not ready, not right now, not today, but I'm also not closed off to it. I'm somewhere in between, in that uncomfortable space of wanting something I don't know how to have, of longing for a future I can't quite picture yet. And maybe that's exactly where I need to be. Maybe being ready means first admitting you're not. I've loved and lost. I've made choices I regret and choices I'd make again. I've learned that fame gives you the world, but sometimes takes away the simple things that make life feel complete. I've discovered that being honest about wanting love doesn't make me less dedicated to music or less grateful for Army. It just makes me human. And I think that's what I want you to take away from this. That I'm human, just like you, figuring things out one day at a time. Will I get married someday? I honestly don't know, but I hope so. I hope I find someone brave enough to love me despite the chaos, someone patient enough to wait through the hiding and the distance, someone strong enough to build something real in the middle of all this craziness. And when that day comes, if it comes, I hope you'll understand that it's not about choosing them over you. It's about choosing to be whole, to be complete, to be the best version of myself, which ultimately makes me better for you too. Until then, I'm going to keep making music, keep pursuing art, keep trying to be worthy of the love you give me every single day. And I'm going to keep being honest, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's complicated, because you deserve that from me. You deserve to know the real me, not just the image, not just the idol, but the person underneath who's still growing, still learning, still hoping for a future that includes all the beautiful, messy, complicated things that make life worth living. Thank you for listening, Army. Thank you for loving me through all of this. Thank you for being patient with my journey, wherever it leads. This is Kim Taehyung, and this is my honest answer. I'm not ready yet, but maybe someday I will be. And when that day comes, I hope you'll still be there cheering me on the way you always have. For now, I'm exactly where I need to be. Still searching, still hoping, still believing that somehow, despite everything, love is possible. Even for someone like me,